This message comes from NPR sponsor Sony Pictures Classics. I'm Still Here from filmmaker Walter Salles is the true story of one family's resilience when a dictatorship attempts to tear them apart. Led by a Golden Globe winning performance by Fernanda Torres, now playing select cities.
Hello, hello. I'm Brittany Luce, and you're listening to It's Been a Minute from NPR, a show about what's going on in culture and why it doesn't happen by accident. Okay, y'all, this week we are all going to be connecting the dots between the DOJ, a McDouble, and your civil rights. I know. How are all of these things connected? Well, we are going to find out with Columbia Law professor Olatunde Johnson and Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Wesley Lowery. Welcome to It's Been a Minute.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. It's been a minute.
Hey, you know what? Wesley, it has been a minute. It has been a minute. But I'm happy to have you on this show. If you could start a podcast with any civil rights hero, who would it be and why?
Oh, there are so many. Pauli Murray, Bayard Rustin. I might pick Ted Shaw, who a lot of people don't know about, but who headed the NAACP Legal Defense Fund for a long time and is a professor at UNC. He is so wise. So I would want to hear from him.
I love that. Wesley, what about you?
That is an excellent question. I think my answer to this is the Reverend James Lawson, because he trained so many of the activists when they themselves were younger. And I feel like he would have some pretty good behind the scenes stories about everybody else, which would then make for a pretty juicy podcast.
That is a pretty good one. That's a pretty good. Those are both excellent choices, but I got to say, I'll say regardless of whoever you would have as your co-host, I'm sure y'all would have a lot to cover on your show after the past couple of weeks, so let's get into it.
Mr. President, you have today blamed the diversity element.
That tape is of the president's press briefing this week after the tragic plane crash in D.C.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that.
Which the president speculated was the fault of programs aimed at diversity, equity, and inclusion. DEI for short.
That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
And on his very first day in office, President Trump signed an executive order aimed at, to quote him, ending radical and wasteful government DEI programs and preferencing. Basically, ending DEI programs within the federal government. In short, Trump wants DEI to DIE. But the dismantling of DEI goes beyond the federal government. We're also seeing private companies voluntarily dismantle their own DEI programs. In recent months, we've seen rollbacks from Amazon, Walmart, Target, and even McDonald's, home of the McDouble. Part of why might have to do with President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, Harmeet Dillon. Trump specifically praised Dillon's previous work, quote, suing corporations who use woke policies to discriminate against their workers. Now, DEI policies have generally been used to promote the consideration of underrepresented groups, like members of the disabled and LGBTQ+ communities, women, and people of color in hiring. But now, some of these same policies are being labeled as discriminatory. If this becomes the focus of the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, it begs the question, is the definition of civil rights changing? But first, Professor Johnson, Wesley, what was your reaction to seeing private companies roll back their DEI initiatives?
So when I saw private companies in the wake of the election rolling back their DEI initiatives, I thought, oh, they're beginning to see that Trump may win, and they're fearing either federal government action against them or state and local, because there had also been state laws purporting to ban DEI. So they were looking at some of the political tea leaves. I will mention one more thing. There was some shareholder activism even before the election to try to get rid of DEI. So they were facing pressure in some cases from shareholders.
Yeah, that's right. I just think that it was unfortunately unsurprising that kind of we had seen this coming, this playbook being run and played even before Donald Trump was elected. That shareholder activism, the set of conservative activists who were pushing around these ideas and also doing everything they could to take something that had been seen as a positive. And yet what we saw was a very effective campaign over the course of several years to divorce the concept of diversity, equity, inclusion from what it actually kind of was intended to mean at its core by its best practitioners, and to associate it broadly with any initiative, any program, any policy, any scholarship, anything that may in some way work towards remedying some type of disparity or inequity.
Yeah, one of the things we discussed on this show last year was the way that the term DEI came up in the wake of the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapse in Maryland, where the Baltimore mayor, a younger, kind of stylish Black man, came in and did a press conference, and then suddenly the terminology came up that he was the DEI mayor. That felt like a big turning point in terms of, oh, okay, this is now thought of perhaps by some people as a pejorative. Now, some of these companies that have kicked these policies have cited the Supreme Court's decision on affirmative action back in 2023 as justification for rolling back these initiatives. Professor Johnson, how was that 2023 decision a big stepping stone in this perhaps more conservative take on the Civil Rights Act?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting that you were talking about DEI as a cultural moment, right? Because there's cultural language around the attack on DEI. It's a political movement, but the term is not a really clear concept legally. Nevertheless, we've seen this really intensive campaign against something that people who oppose affirmative action call racial preferences. And that's the explicit use of race as a factor. And it starts in higher education. You get this case, SSFA, which you mentioned, against Harvard and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, saying that they are practicing race-conscious affirmative action. It violates the Equal Protection Clause. So the court says in that case, you can't do that. But immediately afterwards, you see a move by conservative activists, state attorney generals in some states to apply it to the employment context. The case mentions nothing about employment. A lot of private employers aren't covered by the Constitution. But there's an attempt to say that any kind of consideration of race, even to bring people together in a workplace or to remedy past discrimination, is going to violate the Equal Protection Clause. It's really a big leap. It hasn't been established by the Supreme Court. But that's what is the effort. It's a political effort to use that legal ruling in a very different context.
There's the legal angle, which you just discussed, and there also is the cultural angle, which is how people are feeling about this legally somewhat vague term of, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And thinking about the Civil Rights Division, Wesley, I know you have covered race and justice across different presidential administrations. How much of this is kind of like at the whim of or decided by the administration in power?
A lot of it is. And I actually think that's a really important point. I think that for many people, certainly probably from like the middle of the political spectrum towards the left of it, right, there's a very specific belief and idea of what terms of like civil rights mean or what they invoke, what we're talking about, right? But what we have to remember is that there are more expansive definitions or people who use those terminologies in different ways. And so what we see frequently with the partisan turnover at the White House, right, is that you will see different administrations who begin to interpret the charge of, say, a division like the Civil Rights Division, right? And so to go to times that were a little less charged, although having lived through them, it's funny to think about this era as less charged, although it objectively was. When George W. Bush comes in and he is running the federal government and he's got a Republican attorney general, the people who he was appointing to run the Civil Rights Division of DOJ operated very differently than the people who had been there during the Clinton administration before him, and very differently than the people who ran it under Obama afterwards, right? That there was a different understanding of what would be prioritized, what would be sought after, right? And what we see is this question of how much of the work of creating an equal society is in front of us versus how much of it's behind us. And so therefore, how should we behave today?
So taking all of this in, how do you see this affecting workers? Like, while the federal workers are almost certainly going to be laid off, how might this affect people already working at, some of these private companies that are rolling back their DEI initiatives, or even people who are seeking jobs at companies like this?
Yeah, I think it's going to lead to a lot of confusion in the private sector. There is a fear in the language, and both in the executive order and then some of the surrounding language, that private companies might be investigated as if they are violating civil rights laws just by having DEIA offices. And because that term is so broad, and as we talked about, it may lead to confusion about can we not celebrate these holidays? Can we not acknowledge this history? And what groups does it apply to? And how does that meet our statutory obligations to enforce civil rights law?
Overall, what are the consequences of a conservative approach to civil rights on all of us?
I think on all of us, it could make workplaces and other arenas less inclusive, tolerant, equal. I think it has a severe impact on all of us. I mean, one of the questions I always ask myself is, what's the vision of society at the end? And this was referred to also by Wesley in his comments, this kind of vision of scarcity. And I think about Heather McGhee's wonderful book, The Sum of Us, which is to say, what if we envision the creation of public institutions, social goods, economic goods, not on a model of scarcity, but one of true full participation and thriving, so that we're not at each other? Like, what vision, what's the end game here? And this kind of, we all have to fight for this limited pie could really lead to a society where you're getting back to forms of hierarchy, or entrenching forms of hierarchy around race and sex. It can also really, I think, lead to the demonization of particular groups. I mean, I think some of the most vulnerable populations, least protected by majoritarian politics, as we'd say in the law, are on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity. And you worry about violence, demonization, and real sort of casting out of people based on their background or identity. And that would be unfortunate. And I think we should all feel like that's a harm to our moral core, as well as affects our economic bottom line.
No, of course. Well, and to build up off of that, when a government plants a flag in the ground and says, we are going to actively oppose something, and in fact, we're going to raise the specter that we might investigate people who do X, Y, and Z, what you end up having is a bunch of companies, corporations, nonprofits, universities, other institutions. None of them want to be the test case. None of them want to be the ones. So they are starting and they're looking around and they're going, could someone call this DEI? Because if so, we're getting rid of it. And so what we know is that there are going to be a lot of programs today that, by any actual definition, don't even fall into the type of DEI that we are talking about, or where there may actually be some type of substantive legal debate about.
Sure.
But that it's a scholarship for, an urban reporting workshop scholarship. And it's like, wait, is this a Black people scholarship? That sounds like DEI to me.
DEI,
Get rid of that, right? Wait, women in STEM? That sounds like DEI. Helping veterans? We are seeing just a very different posture than the one that has been held towards these types of programs by, frankly, both Democratic and Republican administrations for much of the most recent history, the current president excluded.
I wonder, what do you think has led the Trump administration and other conservatives to believe that DEI is, quote, preferencing certain people as opposed to addressing like historic discrimination?
Well, I think that there are a few things. I think there are people who genuinely believe that. I also think there are people who see this as an extremely convenient political tool. And what we know is, historically in American context, fear of immigrants, fear of other people plays to nativism, plays to a purity of quote unquote white identity, have been some of the most powerful forces in the history of our domestic politics. And there is a consistency in messaging that argues that to put something in my pot is to take something out of yours, right? It plays to a very fundamental fear of scarcity that we all have as humans and all biological, creatures have, right?
Yeah, and if you don't get enough, then that's the end of you, your life, your family,
your race, your bloodline, your whomever. And so we're so focused on giving it to Black women or to trans men or to who that. What about me? What about us? And so it's that feeling of neglect, or that feeling that you have lost something, even if objectively you have not.
One of the things I keep thinking about with this is how race plays into these decisions and into what people even just culturally believe about these programs and initiatives. As we discussed, the point of DEI programs has traditionally been to, bolster representation for underrepresented groups within the workplace. But, we've discussed on this show before how DEI has become, for some people, a shorthand for unqualified employees of color. But conversely, if we think of the affirmative action Supreme Court decision from 2023 as kind of like a precursor to all this, it's useful to remember that the group affirmative action disproportionately benefited was white women. But Professor Johnson, Wesley, I have learned so much here. Thank you both so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
We'll be right back with a little game I like to call But Did You Know? Stick around.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Betterment, the automated investing and savings app. CEO Sarah Levy shares how Betterment utilizes tech tools powered by human advice.
Betterment is here to help customers build wealth their way. And we provide powerful technology and complete human support where technology can deliver ease of use and affordability, and the people behind that technology can provide advice and guidance.
Learn more at Betterment.com. Investing involves risk. Performance not guaranteed.
This message comes from CarMax. Searching for your next car? Don't settle. Thrive. At CarMax, it's easy to shop online or in person. With upfront pricing and tools designed to help, finding a car you love has never been easier. Plus, you can sell or trade in your current vehicle with an online offer in minutes, no strings attached. Start shopping now to find a car you'll love at CarMax.com. CarMax, the way it should be. This message comes from BetterHelp. Every January brings you 365 blank pages waiting to be filled. What do you want your 2025 story to be? Therapy can help you craft the next chapters with purpose. BetterHelp offers therapy 100% online with a diverse network of over 30,000 therapists worldwide. Visit BetterHelp.com/NPR today to get 10% off your first month.
All right. We are going to play a little game I like to call But Did You Know? Here's how it works. I'm going to share a story that's been making the headlines this week, and as I give you some background on this story, I'll also ask you trivia related to it. But don't worry, it's all multiple choice. The first one to blurt out the right answer gets a point. Person with the most points wins. And their prize is bragging rights.
Yeah.
Are y'all ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. To start, the 67th annual Grammy Awards take place this Sunday in Los Angeles. Dozens of our favorite artists will be dressed up to the nines, perhaps in a tube top or in a navy blue tuxedo. I don't know. Each hoping to go home with one of those little metal trophies that signify a win. Which of these medals is not used in the process of creating a Grammy trophy? Look, y'all both snapped to attention when I asked this question. Which of these medals is not used in the process of creating a Grammy trophy? A, brass, B, zinc, or C, copper?
B, zinc.
What say you, Wesley?
That's what I was going to guess, too. I was going to guess B, zinc.
Okay, well, y'all were both wrong. Sorry. The answer is brass. The awards are made from a special zinc alloy called gramium.
Oh.
Okay. I know. And before it gets plated with 24 karat gold, they get plated with copper. So there you go.
I didn't know that.
They just don't have any brass in them. All right. Question number 2. We all love a one-hit wonder. I still love me some Lou Bega, okay? But there is nothing like a repeat winner. Of these divas, who has the most Grammy wins? Is it A, Mariah Carey, B, Whitney Houston, or C, Leontine Price?
I'm going Mariah.
Okay, Wesley says Mariah. What do you say, Professor Johnson?
I kind of was thinking Mariah, but I'll mix it up and say Whitney. B.
You know, I gotta say, I would have guessed either.
We're both wrong.
Y'all are both wrong.
We agreed before this we were just not going to get any of the questions right. You know?
Is this a protest?
Might be.
Okay. All right. Well, the answer is C, Leontine Price, the world-renowned opera singer who is still with us, by the way, won a whopping 13 Grammys throughout her career. Fun fact, Leontine and Whitney are first cousins once removed. So you could say the voice runs through the family.
That whole family. You know, Dionne Warwick's in that family, too.
Hello, Sissy Whitney.
Sissy.
I get chills when I think about it.
Exactly, Sissy. Yeah.
All right, well, to recap the score, Wesley, you are at 0 points, and Professor Johnson, you are also tied for 0 points. All right, so without further ado, the final, technically, tie-breaking question. The Grammys don't just award the best singers, they also award spoken word performances. In 1971, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was posthumously awarded a Grammy for which of these speeches? A, I Have a Dream. B, Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam. Or C, I've Been to the Mountaintop.
So this is
I'm
hard.
not sure which one, actually. Yeah. I'm just going to go with I Have a Dream because, I mean, I love the mountaintop speech, but, well, I'm not. It trails a little at points. So I'm going with A.
All right, so Professor Johnson says A. Wesley, what say you?
Hey, I'm pretty sure they didn't give him a Grammy for the Vietnam speech. That seems very unlikely. And I also prefer the mountaintop speech, but my guess here is going to be the I Have a Dream speech.
Well, I have to say, this might be a first in the playing of this game. You both were wrong again.
Oh, this is amazing.
Sorry. The answer is actually Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam.
Oh, we have little faith.
I know. Listen,
Truly.
I know. Shocked as I was as well, I could not believe that he was awarded a Grammy for that. But I have to say, I'll say though, this is actually maybe one of the only times we've ever had a tie on the show.
Love it.
So you're both winners. How about that?
There we go.
Oh, that is wonderful. And hopefully we got a chance to educate people through our mistakes. And that's the
how
best
we learn.
lesson.
It's the best lesson.
That's educator right there. Look at that.
That's an educator right there. I was going to say. All right, well, that's it for But Did You Know for this week. Congratulations to both Professor Johnson and Wesley on your win. And Wesley, Professor Johnson, thank you both so much for joining me today.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Brittany.
That was Columbia Law professor Olatunde Johnson and Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Wesley Lowery. This episode of It's Been a Minute was produced by
Corey Antonio Rose,
Barton Girdwood.
This episode was edited by
Jasmine Romero.
Our executive producer is
Verilyn Williams.
Our VP of programming is
Yolanda Sanguini.
All right, that's all for this episode of It's Been a Minute from NPR. I'm Brittany Luce. Talk soon.
This message comes from Warby Parker. What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost, like free adjustments for life. Find your pair at warbyparker.com or visit one of their hundreds of stores around the country. This message comes from Warby Parker. Prescription eyewear that's expertly crafted and unexpectedly affordable. Glasses designed in-house from premium materials starting at just $95, including prescription lenses. Stop by a Warby Parker store near you. This message comes from Ameriprise Financial, proud sponsor of public media. For over 130 years, clients have relied on the strength and stability of Ameriprise to help them feel more financially confident. Learn more at ameriprise.com/advice. Member FINRA and SIPC.